I'm Brian DeLuca, one of your hosts, along with Nicoletta Mino. Thank you for joining us today for a live chat on new and creative ways to educate your children at home. Please ask the questions in the Q&A below, as we'll be taking questions for our experts during this whole conversation. Nicolette?
Hi guys, as Brian mentioned, we're going to talk a lot about new ways to educate our children, which is a really timely topic. And so we've brought on some experts in this area. We've got Dr. Liz Franklin, aka Mama Liz, and Crystal Henry, and I will kick it to them to introduce themselves, and we're going to get into a discussion about everything we need to know about this new way of learning and teaching. So Dr. Start us off, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is I'm the founder of Classroom Without Walls. I'm a professor turned entrepreneur, taught in the classroom for 10 plus years. Now I run my own school.
Mama Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz Franklin, Mama Liz. I specialize in children and youth and teenagers and college students learning about time, priorities, and success. Took years of business, brought that down into the young people's world, and that's where I focus my time and attention. And I was a homeschool mom for 15 years.
Crystal?
Great. Hi, I am Crystal Henry. I am a mom, a wife, I am also an educator by trade, and I am a blogger. So I write about all things related to motherhood and womanhood, and I am well immersed into the virtual learning world and glad to be here with you today.
Thank you all so much. So I think it's really important for us to kick off this conversation by differentiating, homeschooling versus virtual learning, because a lot of the country is in a virtual learning atmosphere right now. But we hear the term homeschool thrown around a lot. So let's talk a little bit about the difference. Who wants to get
I can get this started. I liken this phenomenon of some parents wanting to get interested or get involved in homeschooling to someone who looks at a few videos about plumbing on YouTube, or maybe has watched several documentaries on African American history and claims to become a professor of Africana studies now, and that could not be further from the truth. So I do not claim to be a homeschooling parent. I am a parent who is supporting my son while he is learning virtually. Right. So I do believe that there is a strong difference. And I know that Dr. And Mama Liz can really speak to that. But for me, from a virtual learning perspective, I am supporting what he is learning inside of his traditional school, be it through Zoom or through Blackboard or through any other virtual platform. And I'm helping to supplement what it is that he's learning at home. But I am not his primary teacher. I am not responsible for teaching him all of the necessary skills that he needs to learn.
Yeah. Good. Mama Liz, you've homeschooled. So what is the,
I did. And I jumped into homeschooling when my son was going into high school, which is like the hardest time in the world. And I was actually a little bit different than a homeschooler. I was actually a private teacher, an independent private teacher, but it's still the same concept as homeschooling. It's very structured. It can be. They're very, there was a lot of guidelines as to how to be sure that your children were keeping up with what was going on in the public school. And I used those because education was very important to me. I just got out of my meeting. Anna, help. And homeschooling, sorry, I had a glitch on my computer. Homeschooling is a lot of work. I mean, you've got to learn the material to do it. I have great respect for teachers, believe me, I do. I chose that path because I wanted to have some freedom. Because of what I do, I needed the freedom, and I wanted to be able to choose my curriculum and be able to move my children at the age and the education level they were. There were at times, they might have been in third grade something, in fifth grade something else, and that was just the way I did it. Doesn't mean it's good for everyone. I love virtual learning because so much I have so much respect for teachers and what they have, and what they're doing right now is astonishing to help their children with online learning. But for me, homeschooling was the choice, and I loved it. It was a lot of work to just totally homeschool and be responsible for everything. There's co-ops so that you can transfer some of that teaching into other people who have expertise in other areas, which makes it a little easier. But I agree with Crystal and a lot that you're not an expert immediately, and it takes a lot of work. You know, I was up many nights, hours and hours, relearning how to teach algebra concepts or calculus concepts and things that would have been much easier to just pass it off to let the teacher teach that and me just kind of oversee it. But anyway.
Now, Dr. I, how do you approach this? Now, you homeschool, but you also run a school. So how do you see this?
So I think online learning is only a component of homeschooling, and homeschooling is a much bigger picture. And a common mistake that I notice among homeschoolers or online learning is that they just use homeschooling to kind of duplicate what children are doing in the traditional classroom. Like, 8 a.m. you do this class, 9 a.m. you do this class, and 10 a.m. snack, noon lunch break. So to me, that is not an effective way to do homeschooling. And I think the power of homeschooling is that you can really make learning personal. Mm-hmm. And with my own students and with my own children, we make learning very, very personal, because learning is a personal journey unless I am personally invested in the topic. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to learn this. And actually, the trigger for us to start homeschooling was because my older son, when he was 7 years old, he started to complain about school being so boring, not engaged. That's why we decided to homeschool him. So a big change that we made in the homeschooling curriculum is that, as Mom Liz mentioned, that we really supplement. We don't just follow one curriculum. We actually, here's a class online, there's a class online, this is this project, and I also have my personal project. So it's actually a melting pot of different ideas, different curricula from different approaches. And I think that is the power. You really have the freedom and autonomy to personalize our children's learning based on their interest. I have 2 children myself. They are very different. And so homeschooling is kind of the umbrella concept. And under that, we supplement with online classes, online learning. And right now we can't do much in person, but before COVID and also in-person activities.
Do you think, I want to go back to something, Crystal said. Do you think that our confusion, because I homeschooled, or I virtually learned.
Yeah, but that's why I think those terms are used interchangeably. Brian, you do that a lot.
I do, because here's the thing, and here's my question. I think because, we were all thrown into this, right? It's no one's fault, but we were all thrown into this, and I think even the school systems didn't really know what to do. So those first few weeks, it was like, here's some handouts, right? There were some, in our case, there weren't even online tools. So there wasn't virtual learning. Do you think that's why so many parents have sort of confused those two pieces?
Part of me thinks that they've confused it simply based on logistics that they're working at home. Honestly, I think that they have equated homeschooling to, I am now learning in my house instead of physically going to a school, but it's so much more than that. And again, teachers receive years of training and years of, time spent understanding pedagogy and understanding best practices and collaboration with their colleagues and trial and error to be able to be where they are, the same way that you and Nicolette have gone through years of training and years of trial and error to be where you are right now. So in anyone's respective profession, it's a lot more than simply a transference of location. It's a lot more about, understanding the skills. So Mama Liz talked about the hours of really understanding, algebraic concepts and everything related to homeschooling her high schooler at that particular time. So I don't claim to know that. And even being in education, I am not equipped to to educate and to teach solely my now third grader in all the concepts that he needs. So I think that's really where the misconception came from, is that people think because I'm at home, now I'm homeschooling, but it's so much more. It's so much deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should really appreciate what homeschooling really is for those that want to go in that direction.
Yeah, because mine, I went like, I don't know how you do this first grade math here. You're doing it the way I learned it. Like, that's what we reverted to, because I was like, I don't, I don't.
And I like that idea of, I mean, when we spoke previously, Dr. I really love that personalization, and so, one of the big things I wanted to talk about today was, and I know there's so many that we want to get to, one of the really big things I want to talk about was how do you incorporate, let's say, your virtual learning? Because I think that's what, it's my opinion, I think that's what majority of the parents are probably doing right now, supporting their child through virtual learning. And so, at least here. And so how do you personalize that experience, even though you're following the teacher and the curriculum, but how can you make that more engaging since you're at home and there's not a lot of personal connection there? Anybody want to go?
Yeah, I can start. And so we do quite a few. I'm a big advocate of project-based learning. And we don't really do, I don't really like exams, things like that. With homeschooling, I really have the freedom to do whatever I want. So with different projects, I give our children different projects, like for example, learning math. And my 8 years old, he's really into selling stuff online. So he has been selling stuff on eBay, just like his old clothes, sneakers that we got from our grandparents. They no longer wear them or use them. And so as he's selling stuff online, and he's actually learning like research skills and like listening skills, collaboration skills, and also critical thinking, because we got quite a few like spammers. So we were learning like, is this a spammer? We were having discussions, and of course, learning math. And numbers, how much is this and how much is shipping, and then this and that. So like that's how I want to design learning to make it more personal. Like for example, another example is that like both of my children are really into drawing, and so again, I love using social media. I think the power of social media is to really build a global community to make learning more personal and more globalized. And so my son has a LinkedIn profile, and he will just go to LinkedIn, reach out to his friends and connections and ask them, hey, what's your favorite cartoon character, or what is your favorite food? And then he will do personalized drawing for those friends. And sometimes he will like, I have no idea how to draw that. And then he will take a class or watch some online videos. So our starting point is always starting with the kid. Whatever he is interested in, that's our curriculum. Now, our curriculum is really based on the children. So that's kind of how we approach this to make this more interactive, more interesting. I think education starts with our heart, with the children's heart, not just start with the brain. The brain can be excited, but unless the heart is involved, and otherwise the learning journey will not be long.
Yeah. But is there a way then what if, all right, so my son is following along, let's say he's got to stay home for 2 weeks, he's got to follow this along, and maybe it's really boring in the classroom. I obviously have to do with the assignment that they asked us to do, but there must be better ways to go about this process, even in the virtual learning environment. What are your thoughts on that, Liz?
I think so, definitely. See, I'm kind of in between Crystal and Dr. I, okay? I was very focused on the educational impact of it. I didn't use a lot of online things, but I had a very strong background in a lot of different areas because I was older, and that helped, and a lot of things to pull from. But things that we used very strong, hard curriculum, but then we do things like science. We would do science fairs. We would do science experiments. We would study weather, go out and, go to the meteorologist, go do things that involved what they were learning. See, teachers do this in the classroom.
Right.
They bring in this special stuff, and they do experiments and things in front of the class or work with them interactively, but they lose that sometimes in the online experience. That's where parents can step in and what their kids have an interest in. you can experience things. Math, you know, my grandson had a lot of trouble learning the new math. So when he would come in the afternoon, because he goes to public school, I would sit down and teach him the way that I learned math, the way that I taught math, the way all the way through college, you know, because I was a math major and that was kind of my expertise. And so I would teach the concept to him that way and then apply it to what he was learning. And somehow it helped the brain connect to it. And so that's how I helped him, you know, make that link, where a teacher wasn't there to sit down and do it one-on-one. Now, a lot of teachers are doing individual Zooms with students too. I know that. So, you know, I'm very supportive of teachers, but that's how I homeschooled. And, you know, my daughter's in college. She's a senior at UT and she's a 4.0, you know, honor student. So you can do it, but I invested a lot of time in being sure that she had a very strong background in it. So, and that's what you can do though with the kids, make it fun, bring things in that are fun into the learning. So it's not just all online.
So I'm hearing a lot of project between Dr. Aya and Liz, definitely a lot of project-based stuff and hands-on, get out there. You know, even if you're doing it the proper way that the teacher wants you to do it, kind of make it your own based on your child. So
and the time that you have
there, right?
Right.
Now, Crystal, let me ask you a question though. How do you, okay, so now you're working, right? You're supporting your virtual learner. How do you do that? How do you make it, how do you personalize this for your child?
I really make sure to be involved. So yes, I have a demanding job. So does my husband. And one of the things that I have done with my own personal work schedule is said, these are going to be my work hours and this is what it's going to be. So my job, I could work well into the evening and I can work on the weekends, you know, because it's all from behind a computer, but I have to create some kind of boundaries around my work time. And then it's for me to be involved and I have to participate in what it is that he's doing. I can't just sit a 7 or 8-year-old in front of a computer. And yes, he's pretty tech savvy, so he can navigate all the different platforms himself well. I'm still involved. So I want to, like, we may sit side by side and we're both working together. So I can peek over, I can look, and it requires him to bring his assignments to me or for me to be able to check it before he clicks submit. I'm looking over, so I know exactly what it is that he's doing. And then any announcements that are coming up from his class, from his teacher, I'm staying on top of those kinds of things. So again, involvement, and I heard that from Mama Liz, I hear that from Dr. I, you gotta be involved. So like I can still supplement and be able to expose him to a different way of completing, you know, division or multiplication, Mama Liz. And so again, how I learn multiplication is different than how he's learning it. How I learn long addition is different. But for him, he can learn multiple ways of completing a problem, and that can then open up his mind to different ways of being able to do things. So again, I think it's really involvement. And then for me, you know, for my own personal self, it's really creating some kind of boundaries around my work time so that I am still involved and I have to make an effort to be involved in what it is that he's doing so I know what's happening.
Mm-hmm. So do you think there's going to be, you know, if there's a hybrid approach, right, with some schools and you know, some areas of the country have already gone back to school, is it going to be with that hybrid approach, is there going to apply more flexibility into the timing for school? Because I know, like with my daughters, certain parts of the school had to be done during the day. There were certain times they needed to be logged in, and certain things you could do, you know, at night or whenever, after dinner, or whatever the case is. Do you think, you know, and obviously being an involved parent, you know, you need to be on that. So is there going to be more flexibility in learning going forward?
You know what, I think it may vary, you know, region to region and then school to school and school district to school district. So with my particular district, you know, there is going to be more, you know, like live and kind of session-based learning at the moment. And then there is some discussion around, you know, some other assignments being able to be completed at the kids' own pace. So really, I think it may really be a toss-up, really just based on wherever you are and kind of whatever the school system has decided. But I do think that there should be some real thought put into that, because based on how the child can learn, you may have a kid that learns more in a synchronous setting. You may have a kid that learns more in asynchronous setting. So really there should be some thought into a mixture of both of those so that kids can can work at their own pace in addition to receiving real-time instruction based on whatever the skill is.
And I think also it's very important for children, especially younger children, to have a routine.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a very, hard bound routine, but they need that structure. Adults need that structure. They don't use that and don't realize that it brings a calmness. My grandchildren, my younger grandchildren last year, I had, once the parents went back to work, I went over to do school for them and watch them for the day. I walk in and I'm so excited because on the refrigerator is a colored chart that says, get up time, clean up your room, get ready, do breakfast, and then, 2 hours of English, kind of studies, then a break time for snack. And they could go to their schedule and find out what was next. And it brings a calmness in a child. Well, I came back and then watched them again a few weeks later, and they weren't doing school anymore. So they were no longer on that routine. Their behavior was totally different because having structure helps a child. It brings a comfort. It's like swaddling them in a comfort thing when there's a routine and predictability and they know what to expect in the day. And so for that reason, I think having specific times and they're interacting with their teacher is a good thing. But at the same time, there's some things that, homework and things can be done, or things that can be done at other times is good. But again, they need times that they understand is for learning, because it's really hard when you're at home to separate, okay, I'm home, this is Plate's place, and suddenly it's school place. And so there has to be a mind change. They need a specific place to do their schoolwork, noise canceling headphones, so they drowned out, other things maybe, so that they can concentrate, so they don't hear the dog barking and mom on the phone with her business and those kind of things going on. But they need structure. Internally, we need structure. And so I think there's a good reason for that to a degree, but then freedom at the same time, to work with the individual child.
Well, are there certain times of day that are better to work than other times? What is everybody's experience? Is it kind of, we're seeing, every child is very different. Can we adapt to that? Can we incorporate our own schedule into the virtual learning experience? I mean, I know it's going to be different based on every school district, but I mean, how do we do this in terms of time, making the time?
Well, since time's my subject, I'm going to jump in here first. First of all, the parents need to build their time house. I use blocks with little kids that can't even tell time. And we use 24 blocks and figure out what goes in those blocks. And parents need to do that. And, like with you, Nicolette, you could have clients at one time of day that you don't have another time that can't be changed. And so you need to build your time house every day, or as best that you can, and then build your children's time house inside that as to when education is. According to the rhythm of your hormones, certain things are easier certain times of day. When you first get up, the first 2 hours awake, your communication skills and your bonding skills and your ability to talk about feelings and write maybe letters to someone or do a speech, your communication is best. About around near the 4th hour, and then the first 2 hours are like that. Then 2 to 4 hours is your communication skills increase. So it's a great time to write essays and do things English and things that require that, because the normal rhythm of your hormone system causes you to be better at certain things during certain times. Your power hours, when you have strong concentration and ability to think well in things, is like 6 to 8 hours after you wake up. Well, it was always a strong time for my daughter to pull into the math and science concepts and things that required critical thinking and analytical thinking and things. So there's a natural rhythm in the flow of the body itself that can make you a better teacher. If you're trying to communicate something that's hard to communicate, do it when it's easy to communicate, and when they have to communicate well, do it when it's easy for them to. So that's one thing that helps, is just understanding and studying a little bit about how our natural flow is and what we're good at during different times of the day.
Dr. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't even know that, so I'm definitely learning. But like, yeah, so for me is I really observe my own children. I noticed that each of them is very different. And so I also agree with Mama Liz, what she mentioned earlier, planning is really important. So what we do is Sunday, just like what we do meal plan. So we actually sit together with our own children and we plan out their week, because from Monday to Friday, both my husband and I will work full time. It's very challenging for us to actually check on our children. Hey, are you doing this, and that? So we take out a day to make a plan, and we really hold our children accountable for their plan. And we are more like hands off. And so recently, I interviewed Esther Wojcicki. For those of you who don't know who she is, she's actually the mom of the CEO of YouTube and 23andMe, and also a doctor. So she wrote a book titled How to Raise Successful People. So in that book, she discussed her own parenting approach, raising very successful children. And she's a teacher herself. It's called a trick: trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. So I love that. And so we trust our children a lot, sometimes more, and we give them lots of independence. So on Sunday, we figure out their plan and we hold our children accountable. So yesterday, my son, he actually realized, Mommy, can you actually wake me up early in the morning? I asked him why. I said, I can't fall asleep at night because I get up too late in the morning. So I love it. I allow them to make lots of mistakes. I love it when the realization comes from their own mouth, like telling me, hey, can you please wake me up early in the morning because I'm really having a hard time, falling asleep in the evening. So today, that's what we practiced. And I love when he's holding himself accountable much better. And we also caught him lying because we trust him so much. So we actually put our children in their own room and doing their computer thing. So one day, my husband and I, we asked him, so we use lots of Adobe product. One thing that we use is Adobe Spark. It is free, everyone can use it. So he was supposed to be doing a reflection on Adobe Spark. And then my husband or I walked into the room, he was playing Minecraft. So we actually used that as a great opportunity to have a discussion. I was like, it's not the fact that you were playing Minecraft that made us so upset, because we do let him play games, but because you didn't communicate to us. And so we used that as a way to, we did a really powerful reflection and asked him, he was like, wow, I'm surprised. He said, I'm surprised how hard it is to control my own behavior sometimes. He also said that, like, what I do all the time can potentially become a habit, and we need to catch that before the habit starts to control me. So something like that. I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful. So we actually use that as a great learning point. And so we do lots of things like that. We give them, sometimes I feel maybe too much trust, but we try to use it as a way to make things better and have discussions.
So I have a question. We talked about projects, right? And sort of creative ways of kids learning. And I know, Dr. I know this is something you do. And I know, we should all be involved in our children's schooling as parents, right? And teach them at every aspect. Like the other day, we were cutting wood, and I was teaching my daughters angles and measuring, right? Really simple things that everyone should know how to do. How important is that to pull in to make as many things as you can as a learning experience, as projects as you're going through your life, and using it as a teaching experience?
In my book, as many as possible, because I truly believe the best education happens in the classroom. And I don't know if I shared this last time when I was a guest on the podcast. So one of my favorite learning model is called 70-20-10. So what that model means is that for any transformation to happen, only 10% comes from formal learning, reading a book, taking an online class, watching a video. That's only 10%. 20% is what we're doing right now, having a discussion, working with my peers, working with a teacher, like peer-to-peer learning discussion. And 70% comes from application, real life learning, experiential learning. So like, especially now with homeschooling, I have so much freedom. We do everything as much as possible, project-based. And that's how I approach this.
It's funny too. I think, and we did mention this. I know I mentioned this before when we spoke, Dr. I, and actually I probably mentioned this to everybody because I always talk about it, but it really depends on the child, right? And my son is very difficult. He is a very difficult child. He's a very smart child, but he's actually getting too smart for me. And he's outsmarting me because he can manipulate situations, and he can manipulate me. And I am sitting here trying to balance, working Monday through Friday. And so when he's upstairs virtual, on his Zoom, and he's 5, let's remember, he's also young. He can slack off because I'm only one person and I'm on a call downstairs. And so I missed a lot of things in the beginning of, Brian mentioned it was a really kind of hectic time at the beginning of this. So it was really difficult for me to keep up, and I fell behind. Therefore, he was behind. And so, especially when we spoke with Dr. I recently, how can I teach some of these things just during the summer, without a book, and anytime you try to take out a book, I don't want to read, it's summer, I don't want to, okay, but we got to read something, we've got to read, so it's maybe reading the package of food for the tortoise or the bunny, or, it's something. I take it anywhere I can get it because, I feel like you have to adapt. What are your thoughts on that kind of struggle and kind of catering to the child's personality?
I think go ahead, Mama Liz.
No, go ahead, Crystal.
I think you hit it right on the head, Nicolette, that you have to use any opportunity and every opportunity that you can. So if it's riding in the car and seeing a billboard, it's, what I can't see that. What does that say? Or, tell me, what is this? Or you go to the gas station. What are those numbers? I don't have my glasses on. I can't see it. Pick something up. Or, adding up and saying, listen, so I like to do a lot of oral things with my son. So especially like we're working on spelling, and he will, complain that he needs to be able to write down the words. And so I said, well, you can finger spell on your leg. And he went, oh, I can? Yeah, you can. So what's this word right in the car? And then I'll trick him and say, I don't really think you can spell that word. I don't think you can. And he'll think I'm really serious. And then he'll go, yeah, I can. So I have to, with your son, with him being at this phase, maybe trying to outsmart him in his own way. So maybe flipping it on him and saying, I want to give you this little math problem, but I don't really think you can do it. It's okay. I don't know if you can handle it. I don't really think you can do it. So we kind of playing his own game. And then, maybe it's just taking 1 or 2 little problems, or maybe 1 or 2 little words, or 1 or 2 sentences at a time, and seeing if some of that reverse psychology could work on him, but using a little bit of whatever it is that really speaks to them. Some kids are motivated by praise. Some kids are motivated by a challenge. Some kids are motivated by even competition. So it's, trying to recognize whatever that is in your kid and speaking to that in some small ways. So taking it as some small doses, and then you can expand, as they seem to be able to handle it.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think, like Crystal will probably appreciate, what I'm seeing is parents are getting more involved.
Yes.
And even when we go back to normal, if that ever happens, but you're going to see that these habits that parents are forming of getting involved in the education and trying to incorporate some of this learning just in everyday life is going to enhance their teaching and their learning and help the teaching in their school and their teachers when they go back to school. Because that's one of the big problems is parents think, well, the teacher's just doing it, and they don't get as involved as they should. And I want to mention one more thing about time, and with you, Nicolette, something I thought of, one of the problems with COVID is especially grandparents and older relatives are distant, and they can't be around people as much because they're more contagious and all these things. And you want to involve them with your family. It would be awesome to go ahead and just get extra readers and workbooks and things for the grandparents to have, and involve them in the teaching so that they can sit and listen to the child reading, or go over, discuss they've read a chapter, discuss it with them and things so they could get involved in things a little bit in a way that's healthy, and it saves the parents some time, and then it pulls, that bond with grandparent and child in, and it just kind of, it kind of fixes a whole lot of problems, especially like with you, some days you need a helper. Yep. And that might be a really good way to fix those real busy days and still, and incorporate something that would help with your time and also with the learning.
So,
Yeah.
so I have a
And like I sorry to interrupt, and I love that idea. And also, grandparents oftentimes are a lot more patient than us. There is a big study that came out. They were talking about intergenerational learning. So they allow very young children to mingle and socialize with older people. And so after a period of time, they discovered both the older generation and the young generation, their vocabulary and emotional, physical well-being have improved so much, just like intergenerational. And the fact that I actually do mixed age model at my own school is because when our children are only socializing with their peers, they don't really practice that intergenerational learning. So when you allow your children to communicate with grandparents, people who are much older than them, it is actually also good for their vocabulary and social emotional learning. So I love that idea.
That's a great idea.
So I have a question. I have twin 7-year-olds, right? And one, virtual learning, really easy. She would just go do what she needed to do. The other one, this is boring. This is, it was, I mean, she actually was reading a book on what makes you grumpy, and she had to write an essay on it. And she wrote, virtual learning makes me grumpy. Like that was the title of it. So what can parents do, right? Because they do have to do this. If they have to have that virtual learning component in their education, what can parents do to sort of get them more involved with that virtual learning piece?
I think, if I can interrupt here, I think instead of forcing our children to adapt to a traditional curriculum, why don't you ask your own daughter, right? Like, okay, online learning is boring. How do you envision learning? What is more fun to you? And to see if you can find a happy middle ground between what our children have to do and what they prefer to do. And I taught so many kids, and what I discovered is that every kid learns very differently. Actually, there's a book that I love. It's called The End of Average, arguing that the entire school curriculum is standardized, is developed for the average kid, but we don't really have an average kid. Every kid learns differently. So if I were you, I would have a conversation with my own kid. I call this the pedagogy of listening. So many parents, we show up as a dictator. You have to do this, or like teacher told you have to do this, and this is the only way to learn. But we forget learning is collaborative, right? And our children are collaborators. And so why don't we have a conversation with our children? Okay, online learning doesn't work for you clearly. How do you prefer to learn? And can you teach me? That's how I tell my own children, right? We are on this together. You don't like to do the workbook. Okay, so tell me, how do you prefer to learn? And then see if you can get something out of that conversation. And then maybe you can have a conversation with the teacher or supplement something at home to make learning more personal, more fun for this kid. That's kind of how I would approach this.
Yeah,
I would agree that more. Yeah, I think we should be doing that more, even in the traditional classroom, because I mean, one of the points I wanted to raise is, my son is going back to full-time 5-day-a-week instruction. And so that doesn't change the fact that he doesn't want to learn the way that he's learning. I mean, whether he's home or he's at school, he doesn't want to be there. I mean, he just doesn't like to learn. That's not his thing, but he doesn't like to learn the way that we keep making him learn, to Dr. I's point. And I think it depends on the school, obviously, but if I approached my child's school and asked for some, variations or, whatever it might be, especially at his age, I think they'd be more than happy to work with me in any way that would make him enjoy learning.
Right. So do you think that depends on the school system too then, right? Because right, my children are in public school, right? And then Nicolette's son is in private school. So it'd be harder for me to go, hey, you know what? Because like we do a lot of projects around, like we built this giant fairy garden in the backyard, like, and had as a teaching sort of project, like how to sort of organize a town, you know what I mean? But my point is it based on the school system your children are in, is that really going to dictate how much flexibility you have? You always have that as a parent is my point, what you're teaching them, but in their learning, in their school learning, is it really dictated by what school system they're in and how much?
I kind of want to say it depends on really who the teacher is. So my son started out in Montessori, and then he is now in public school. And really, it's one of those sayings where the squeaky wheel really will get the oil. So if you are an involved parent in a public school, if you are communicating with the teacher, if you are, sharing information, making this a partnership. This is not simply I am dropping off my kid, now you take over. No, we're in partnership. So, and I come from a public school background. My husband is a public school principal. So I believe in public school. I like private school as well. I just want to keep my dollars right now. So, I think it really is more about how you are approaching the relationship with your child's teacher and looking at it as a partnership. So I'm already thinking about how I am going to be approaching my son's new teachers this year. He's going to be departmentalized for 3rd grade, and what information I'm going to share, how he learns best, what really speaks to him, so that they have a clear understanding of who he is as a learner, and then an even clearer understanding of who we are as a family, and how and what it is that we value and what it is that we want to see, and then still being in constant communication with them, communication, more of a, how did this assignment go? And virtually it is going to be a lot different, but I think it is looking at it as a partnership and a relationship rather than they are taking over and this is now their time and I get to step back.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that might help, like with your children, that when they don't want to sit and just learn, like on remote learning, my daughter, her personality type, and she's in college, and she did one of her communication speeches on her personality type. And she's the kind that puts things off to the last minute. She enjoys the rush of getting it done. She gets bored sitting in the same place, but she studied her personality type, and she knows that she can, like, if she does her studies, maybe in the living room one day, and in her bedroom one day, and at the desk one day, and down at campus one day, and the variety of it takes over for this boredom of repetition that was causing it to be a bog down. At the end of her speech, she finally said, I do carry a 4.0. Because she's talking and everybody's like, oh gosh, this is the worst student ever. She has horrible habits, but she has learned her personality type and how to champion that. And little kids, you can't really tell a lot about it, but you can tell some about it and how they operate as a person on the inside. And what, if they're bored all the time, good chance she's a lot like my daughter, who would just be bored to death to sit for 4 hours watching an online class every day doing the same thing. And so she just learned to change up even the setting and how she listened to it, and what just little things to bring some variety to it that made it something that she could stand and do and enjoy and learn well. And so that's something to think about too, because every one of us is different. And the way that we learn and the way we process is different. And so we have to remember our children have that same difference. And when you actually start looking at those little cues, and then how, go read about how to overcome these weaknesses in the different personality types, you can apply that then to your children. And even though it's going to be a while before they can take a Myers-Briggs and find out what they are or whatever, you still see tendencies. And so that's something that can help to understand.
So what I'm hearing, really, I mean, obviously it's all about the individual child, right? We all know that, but what we'll probably see out of this is more flexibility in some of the education systems, is what I'm hearing from, I think, the three of you.
Yeah, I mean, and the way that we communicate with our, if we send them to school or not, the way we communicate with those teachers and our open-mindedness, maybe the school system's open-mindedness, who knows? I don't know, I'm pushing it. But one of the other things I really wanted to talk about, and this is something that came up with Dr. I, and I'd love to hear from everybody on this, because social media has become taboo for young children, keep them off the gram or whatever, whatever it is. And that's,
Oh, that was
the TikTok or whatever it is. So, but here's the thing: when we spoke to Dr. I, and she mentioned it just before, we can actually teach our children some life skills while we have this opportunity. So we're home, whether we're homeschooling or virtual learning, we then have the opportunity to teach them stuff that they're not going to learn in school. Forget all the stuff that we have to teach them. The stuff that they'll actually need, like some basic social media skills and
communication.
Right. So, Dr. I, kick us off, talk to us a little bit about.
Totally. I just read an article yesterday, those important life skills our children are not learning from the traditional school environment anyway. So now with COVID, being homeschooling is a great opportunity for parents to actually supplement and develop those important life skills. Yesterday, I actually did a training. I shared 5 different ways that we can really use social media as a way to build our children's careers and to develop important life skills. So I just like some quick examples. For example, hashtag search, right? Like I pretty much, we all know Google is a search engine. So I use all the social media platforms as a search engine. Like my children, they're young, 5 and 8, they are really into Minecraft. So what I do is that I actually coach my 8 years old, hey, go to LinkedIn, you see that little box? And enter a hashtag and enter Minecraft. So through that, he actually identified a group of, Minecraft developers and Minecraft gamers who are really into this and educators. And so it's a great way for him to connect with those people. And especially if your children are older, they can start practicing digital networking. We all know traditional networking, right? You go to an event, but now let them do digital networking. I can't tell you how much my business has grown as a result of my ability to engage in digital networking. And so few students are actually learning that. Even in my program, I just wrapped up. One common question students ask me, hey, Dr. I, how do I send an email to a stranger? They have no idea, like I want to connect with this person on LinkedIn. What do I say, right? How, like they don't learn that. So like if you can coach your children, again, start with their personal interests. Maybe they're not into Minecraft, they're into cooking. Like then YouTube is a great channel, do a hashtag search. What are those channels talking about YouTube? You can even ask your children to do a research paper. Okay, here are 5 channels talking about cooking. Why is this channel better than the other one? What is something really good about this? And can you also coach your children to learn some basic graphic design skills? And I can just like so many really important life skills that they can learn. And especially my 8 years old is launching a podcast. So if your children are older, perfect, launch a podcast, right? So after you identified all those like Minecraft developers, movers and shakers, can you reach out to them and invite them to be on your podcast, right? So that's a great way. Or after your children read a book, wow, this book is so amazing. I learned so much about, zombies, whatever. And after you read that book, can you do we use Canva a lot. Can you actually create a very simple image and share a reflection, a really powerful quote from the book that you love and post that on LinkedIn? As you are posting that, can you tag the author? You are practicing, you are sharing, and the author, guess what? If an 8 years old tag me, I'd be like, oh my God, this is so exciting. So just some simple ideas, and you can really transition from perceiving social media as so disruptive, actually to use it as a way to develop who they are as an emerging professional, talking about building an online presence, entering today's show me economy. I mean, McKinsey, LinkedIn Learning, like so many global reports have highlighted digital storytelling, digital literacy is a very important skill. And I don't think we can teach our children digital literacy by banning social media completely. We have to show them the good, the bad, the ugly, and have an honest discussion. If my children are going to use social media anyway, I would rather to have a conversation with my children regarding a more educated approach to social media.
I agree.
Yeah.
I was taking notes because I have an 8-year-old who is also very much into Minecraft and into Roblox. And, I think it can be good. And I did not ever, your statement about building them as an emerging professional, I think that right there really spoke to me because I don't mind him being on it. Sometimes the length of time may annoy me a little bit, but I do realize that you know, what he's doing is still building his skills with math, with literacy, and then also with him just understanding how the digital world works. And so at 8 years old, you know, versus when I was at 8, it's a whole different world. So the digital world is not going anywhere. It's only going to become more robust. So I really do appreciate you saying, you know, really teaching them how to better navigate it. And I had never considered, you know, having him to create a LinkedIn profile so that it can be, you know, having him to use it more of a professional, you know, platform, and really teaching him that side of things. So I was taking notes, Dr. I.
Oh, that's very kind of. And just to add up on that is like many children, because they never learned the professional aspect of social media. So especially if my school is banning social media, so their interpretation of social media is this is so bad. This or you like the more curious they become, right? And so they kind of in that cycle. So what you do is to really introduce another way. At the same time, do discuss, you know, social media can be, these are some potential, you know, spammers, you know, all those people can happen. Have a discussion, teach them, you know, how you turn on two-factor verification, how you change your password, all those things to be more educated, as opposed to, hey, this is bad, put it away. And I don't think that is a very smart approach to handle social media. And even like I work with Adobe and quite a few different brands. There are always opportunities they're always looking for Gen Z. And guess what? They're always looking, do this kid, does this kid have an online presence? Not just like posting selfies, but actually building a community and create a social movement, right? Whatever, so many children right now care about Black Lives Matters and social justice. Can you actually tap into the power of social media to create a global movement? And that is very good. If I'm hiring people to work for me, I love stories like that. This means that you have a sense of agency, you know how to leverage social media to create something bigger. And those are really important life skills.
Mama Liz, what are your thoughts on this?
I think social media, I agree totally with Dr. I. One thing as a time person though, and something that I see with young children, especially who just have unlimited access to their, you know, they sit on their iPads or whatever, all many hours. You know, it's not controlled, it's not thought out, it's just a babysitter. And so I have to address that area. You know, one of the skills that I see that children are losing is the time to just be away from things that are all mine, to be able to create, be alone, be thinking, be, you know, I want to see the inventors and the creative writers and those kind of things. You need time to reflect inside, away from those things, to find you. And so that's an aspect of it. You know, I do use it, and I encourage it, and I absolutely believe, you know, I see college students on LinkedIn who don't know how to communicate, you know, and it's terrible because I'm like, well, this is a college student. I can always tell when that, you know, when they message me, I'm like, okay, this is a college student. They've been taught in college how to write this little formal letter, but they really don't know how to communicate and to connect to people. But at the same time, I want to be sure that we put boundaries around their free time away from electronics and things, to allow their minds to just be free and then find themselves and their creativity. And so that would be kind of the only thing that I would add to what they said. I agree with everything that's been said, but at the same time, you know, just adding
balance, the balance.
Yeah, I had a point. Yeah, this is such a great point. And do you guys know there's actually a new term, like our children, especially the younger generation, their hand doesn't have the muscle to hold pencils. I forgot the term of the disease because they rely so much on technology. So I'm so happy that Mom Liz mentioned that point. I forgot the term, it's a really long term. And so like what we do is like we do everything on paper first, and even creating like Adobe Spark do book reflections. Everything happens, especially for younger children, happens on paper first, and then we translate that into social media. Here's another book that I read quite a few years ago, is when our children are doing like practicing cursive writing, And the fact that they are doing that and actually activate both atmospheres of the brain. And in contrast, if your children are only typing, you only use one side of the brain.
Exactly.
And so very, very important. I'm so happy we brought this up, because parents need to understand, even though technology is important, writing and building that muscle and activating both atmospheres of our children's brain, very, very important. And you can't do that through just like boom, 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 typing on the computer.
And you don't remember it either as well.
No, you want to
learning,
activate more senses.
You just sit and type all your little notes like in college and something. Now, if it's just like facts, I read a research recently, and I don't have the reference, but they've done some recent research and found out that, because I've always said you need to write it to get it in both parts of your brains working so you remember it better. And that's true to a degree if it's concepts. But if it's just a fact and figure, like 1922, this happened or something like that, or a mathematical just fact, then putting it in the computer is fine. Just go ahead and do that. But if it's a concept that you need to actually process in your brain, you need both parts to be able to remember it. And it pulls in a whole lot of different thinking processes that just don't happen unless you write it. So
I think one of the things that Dr. I was really saying here, and, and it's basically, and sort of what you were saying too, Mama, is, if they're just scrolling through or just sitting there watching videos, that's much different than them being active on social media, either creating or, do you know what I mean? And that's the big thing. I know when Dr. I and Nicolette and I spoke with her last, I was like, my daughter's very into YouTube, as most young kids are. We were like, what does it take to actually produce YouTube videos, And we went through the process. Like, they thought we just filmed and it was done. And it was like, no, here's how we edit. Here's how we here's how we communicate that. Here's how we share that privately. Do you know what I mean? With people and things like that. And went through all the other pieces that went along with it's not just, watching. It's the interaction that is important.
Yeah, can I another point to that? I know I'm wrapping this up. So there's another theory I really love in education. It's called Bloom taxonomy, BLOOM. So it's the person who developed this model. So it's kind of a hierarchy. The lowest level of learning is like remember, understand, apply, and the higher cognitive level involves analyze, evaluate, and create. So the highest level of learning that can really develop our children's cognitive ability is to create. So I love that example, Brian. You are actually asking your children to create. That's what we use at home. Learn, reflect, and create. If you can create something, if you can teach me, it means that you actually understand this. And I know this as a teacher. Oftentimes, I thought I understood, but I actually didn't before. Like, oh my God, what is that? Yeah. So
and I even require them to, like, if they're doing something, explain what you're doing, explain how it's done. Do you know what I mean? So they're getting into that teaching aspect. So they're even processing a different way. Like, how do I really explain this, out to people? So.
So guys, we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I think we should end with one thing that every parent can do right now. All right. One thing from each of you. How about that? That every parent can do right now during this virtual learning, homeschooling, whatever learning you want to do. What is one thing that we can take away? Let's kick it off, Crystal.
Sure. I would say to plan to be in partnership. So for those parents who are going to be sending their kids back, be it for a hybrid model or full-time back in the classroom, or even full-time virtual learning at home, plan to be in partnership and plan to be in communication. Really think out what you want that partnership between yourself and your child's teachers to really look like, and go forth in that.
Mama Liz.
I would say to the parents that are homeschooling, especially first time, or remote schooling, online schooling, helping with that and things, believe in yourself. You do have it in you to do what needs to be done. You know your child. The teachers are giving them most of the tools to do it. But the biggest thing I see in parents is they really don't believe that they can be responsible for overseeing this. And I think that's what I would say to parents. Believe in yourself and trust your instincts and trust what you know about your child, and just go with it.
Oh, so sweet. Yeah. So for me, one of my favorite quotes is, when a flower is not blooming, we don't just blame the flower, we actually examine the environment in which the flower grows. So when I think of flower, to me, that means our children. So when our children are not blooming, thriving in the traditional educational model, stop labeling our children, which we tend to do a lot, but actually examine the environment in which our children grow. And to do that, I think it's really, really important, kind of what Crystal mentioned, that we actually build partnerships with our own children, practice the pedagogy of listening, and show up as a collaborator, as a facilitator, as opposed to be a dictator. But, this is our learning experience. So more a collaborative relationship.
That was awesome. All right. I've got goosebumps. Thank you so much, guys. Brian, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. We will post links to everyone's site in the description below, so make sure you check them out. And that's probably my one bit of advice to all the parents. Make sure you check out all these experts, because we could all learn a lot from them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.